and they asked me, like, hey, can you watch these, like the day before or something like that? And I'm like, oh, what? One went missing. I don't know what happened. And
Jack admitting to theft live on the broadcast.
All right. Listen, if you had those handed to you, Dratnos, you steal, Adrian's lines enough, I'm sure that you would have stolen one of the statues. Okay?
All right. Good afternoon, gamers. It is I, TTV Tettles, your host. Automatic Jack has been removed from the broadcast as he admitted to theft live on stream. And Nagura, we have these 3 dungeons here. Necrotic Wake, the other
we
side.
are ready to go, Tettles, so I'm going to have to stop you right there. The teams are all set to go. You'll have plenty of time to talk in just a moment, okay? And you'll have plenty of time to finish up the series and go trick-or-treating. Let's see how these teams are going to be doing. Aster.y, Ambition facing off in Necrotic Wake to start us off.
All right, so let's take a look what both of those teams can show us in Necrotic Wake. One thing to note is that Aster.y has not played Necrotic Wake yet, while Ambition has played the dungeon before, had a 14-minute 21 time, which is not the best time, 40 seconds off the best time, but they had a lot of time to overnight and over the 2 days that we had the globals to improve their strategy if they felt like they can somehow.
I do really feel like this series of matches is these are ones that Ambition absolutely can take down from Aster.y. Aster.y has put up some insane times, but we haven't really seen them play Necrotic Wake, DOS, and Sanguine Depths all that often. And it's going to be interesting to see like how much their preparation and just the time that they put in before like the global finals really is going to end up meaning to them, because they haven't even played in Necrotic Wake yet. At least Ambition has had the opportunity to put additional time into that and to kind of like set themselves up to just be in a position where this Necrotic Wake was reasonable for them to practice. But right now, Aster.y looks like they're getting the better of this Blightbone exchange, where both of the teams also have Incinerator Arc left below 30% HP.
Yeah, this is really close. I mean, look at the percentage. It's a back and forth between those two teams. And you can see that Aster.y is already done with most of the trash that they've pulled on top here. They still have that Tormentor though, and look at how close that was. Unbelievable. But yeah, look, they are min-maxing the damage so much here. That means though that they're gonna get the anima power quite a bit later, right? Ambition killing that Tormentor earlier meant that they could pick up the power earlier, but that didn't really make a difference as Aster.y is killing the boss 2 seconds earlier.
Yeah, and this is a dead even heat. And I think that this part of the dungeon right here is one of the parts of the dungeon that where we see teams make major decision differences. But it looks like Aster.y and Ambition are both pulling the exact same thing. They're doing this double Bone Carver and the Necromancer here. We've seen a lot of teams end up pulling like Narzuda in this pack. We've seen teams skip this part of the dungeon entirely. And it's kind of funny to see that the teams have come to the same conclusion, even though they are very different regions of the world and have been practicing incredibly different strategies. And Aster.y, they kind of get the better of that exchange and start to pull ahead a little bit on that trash pack.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, the only difference really is that Fire Mage and the Frost Mage, right? We have seen Aster.y play Fire Mage quite a lot, so I guess they just disagree that Fire is better here in this dungeon, because they totally know how to play Fire. They just opted to not pick it here, while Ambition really is choosing that Fire Mage. And we've seen the strength of the Fire Mage too, right? We've seen how good it can be in this dungeon, because Complexity does have the overall best time of this tournament. Oh no, once you're actually going down for Ambition here, they do have the pack almost dead. It's just this one Marauder that they didn't manage to get the shield down. Oh no, they didn't manage to get the shield down. Yes, they're gonna have to wait for another shield. They're missing once damage there.
And on the left side, you see Aster.y here. They don't pull the Marauders into the Narzuda pack. Instead, they play a little bit safer of a strategy and ended up pulling the Marauders into this Necromancer. They allow, they just focus down the Marauder shield, deal with this Necromancer. They're going to be activating their Goliath here in a couple of seconds, where Ambition, with the strategy that was a little bit more bold, Onesie ends up getting just accidentally cleaved by one of those errant frontals, and it costs them a little bit of time. Now Aster.y, they've already started the RP on the Amarth activation. If you walked into that room, there's about a 15 to 20 second arming time on the boss, so it's better to send your rogue over there to deal with that. And now Aster.y engaging a Shroud. It's going to be interesting to see what they pull here and how much they're going to pull into the boss and what weapons they're going to be using on Amarth. And this Executioner, because there's been a difference in decision making for a lot of different teams as to what is going to be used here.
So it looks like they've only pulled Varuth and the Necromancer pack, so no additional trash back here. That is something we've seen from Echo before, but there's still a lot of trash, and the 50% healing reduction aura that they have to deal with Varuth in here as well, plus the 23 Tyrannical Amarth that is constantly pulsing AoE damage on everybody. So this is really scary. They do have those orbs from the Goliath that they repaired earlier with that Steward that is going to help them out a lot here with that passive healing.
All right, and like you were talking about, that Executioner, very dangerous. However, it's being cleaved down pretty well by Aster.y. We've seen a lot of teams put a lot more damage into Varuth, but they do know that that passive healing from those Goliath orbs is going to be able to keep them topped for extended periods of time. And so now they just continue to be stacked up. Right as those Goliath orbs do expire, they get that Executioner killed off, and now they have to deal with one more ad phase on these mages and crossbowmen and stuff like that. And they're doing a great job of making sure that the mages off to the side are shackled. And they also use a turn evil on the other mage. You see it fleeing and tear. There are other abilities that they can use, such as blind and whatnot. But since they don't have any real reliable AoE CC, they're going to have to kill these warriors and crossbowmen.
Yeah, so very interesting choice in race here for Aster.y. They're playing 4 Night Elves in comparison to Ambition having all of those dwarves, because it is bursting. So the dwarf racial removes that bursting, which makes it a lot easier to handle. But because they have the Shadow Priest, Aster is thinking they don't need the dwarf, they have the Master Spell, so they can go with the Night Elf, so they have the Shadow Melt. I would assume it's for the last boss, so they can Shadow Melt the Exile cast and delay it for much longer, which would give them a longer uptime on maybe Bloodlust and cooldowns, which could really make a big difference, because that last boss on the 23 Tyrannical takes a long time.
Yeah, and now Ambition kind of hot on their heels. Onesie did have that death earlier in the dungeon, and that's kind of the difference between these two teams right now, is just how much time that not being able to get that Marauder killed off was. But if you look on the left side of your screen, Aster.y is engaging this massive amount of trash up in the Necropolis, and they do a great job of using Sigil of Chains to get all of those mobs off of the Stitchworks, to whenever the spear gets lobbed by the Rogue from the side of Aster.y, it's able to hit all of the mobs that they absolutely need it to. And Aster.y is dropping so low with all of the bursting. They get that Master Spell that Nagura was talking about, but Xingqian ends up getting potted here, and that can be a time loss for Aster.y. However, no deaths coming through, and this is going to be okay for them.
This is so worth it because they saved a spear. They didn't use any weapons. Look, they still have a spear on the mage, they still have a spear on the rogue, and they might even still have a spear on the Shadow Priest too. They have so many weapons left still that they can use. This is incredible. If they can use them on the bosses exclusively, they're going to be so much quicker. They do have the mind control used as well on this Flash Crafter, so the next trash pack is going to spawn in a second.
So wait, did they just use the Silence Orb on that pack? They didn't use a spear at all? That is insane if they were able to pull that off without using a Javelin.
Yeah.
All right, and so now they have the Flesh Crafters. If you look on the left side of your screen, you see the Flesh Crafters getting polymorphed. They're utilizing the Throat Cleaver to be able to just save themselves a lot of damage, but they keep it in the polymorph whenever that Cleaver is not on CD. And on the right side of your screen, things are going bad for Ambition as they have a full team wipe.
Oh no, that is so bad for Ambition as Nerf goes down and everyone else just immediately follows as all of this trash was running around in the Necropolis as Nerf was kiting. And as soon as Nerf goes down, the mobs were so close to everybody else that they just started augering everyone, and there was just no way to recover without a battle res available either. Very, very unfortunate for them. But Aster.y was already in the lead when this happened. And they're just so quick. They are on that second to last trash pack now, and they are using that Flash Crafter. You can see it in the middle of the room. And look at the positioning of the mobs as well. They're making sure that the Gore Grind is the mob between the Flash Crafter, and there's nothing else between, so they can get those spears onto that high HP mob, making sure that the trash pack dies quicker.
And it's just one of those things that now Ambition is trying to repull the majority of this room, but they no longer have as many offensive CDs as they previously had, and now this Flesh Crafter's casting Repair Flesh. There's like Drain Fluids that are going off the remainder of the pack because they don't have so many CDs that they have at their disposal to kill off the trash. And for Ambition, they are going to be able to get this pack dealt with on a second pull, but now Aster.y is somewhere in the range of maybe 2 minutes ahead, like probably maybe even like 2.5 minutes ahead. And so this is looking really good for them as they have Rot Spew engaged.
Yeah, they're doing a really good job on Aster.y's side. They're on that Rot Spear, and it looked like they are getting a decent amount of damage from that AoE cast in from the Rot Spear. But again, they're positioning themselves so they can get those cleavers onto the Rot Spear without the leftovers, the smaller or the lower HP mobs taking it. So really, really well done. Kiting it around too to guarantee the cleaver hits. And then they're also seeing the Flashcrafter whenever that cleaver is on cooldown to make sure they don't have to deal with it walking around. So really, really well handling of that Flashcrafter, and it's really speeding up that trash a lot if they get those cleavers into the mobs.
Yep, and it's also going to be interesting to see how they're going to have that Fleshcrafter set up for Surge and Stitch Flesh, because on a 23 Tyrannical, this boss is no joke. We've seen teams have major problems on this boss in the past, and for the MDI, at least for global finals meta, they've been using javelins pretty frequently on this boss, but if you end up missing the creation, or if you end up missing any of these meat hooks on the boss, it can just like throw off your flow for how you're dealing with this fight. And so everything needs to go almost perfect for these teams to be able to deal with Surge and Stitch Flesh.
There we go. They did use the javelin now from the rogue onto the boss, and we also saw the paladin taunt the creation away to make sure that the boss is getting hit by the cleaver. So really well done. Small details like that matter, because if one cleaver goes into the creation instead of Stitch Flash, they're losing so much damage. So really nice utility use here. And we're dropping incredibly low. Still has the cheap death available, and now they're getting that last meat hook into Stitch Flash, and look at the creation as well. It is low enough so they can finish it off now. And again, perfect positioning. Paladin taunting the creation, making sure it's in the perfect spot. Really well done.
Yeah, and now Surge and Stitch Flesh is low enough to where you're just making sure that you focus as much damage into the boss. Their creations are kind of close together, and they're going to hook one another as opposed to canceling that Morbid Fixation. But their Shadow Priest is in a position to where he's able to kite out the boss. Great job of using that Fleshcrafter's Cleaver to be able to just end off that fight. And now they're going to hodge the Fleshcrafter before going upstairs. That is actually a very important point of this, is that whenever the Fleshcrafter is hodged, once it comes out of the CC, it is liable to teleport a lot faster if it's in that hodge before you go up top.
That was actually a little bit lucky here, because the Shadow Priest, who was fixated by the boss, also got the cleaver on him, and then it was easier for them to finish off the boss there. But look at the amount of damage they have for Nalthor here. They have the Bloodlust available, they have all their cooldowns popped as well, and they have that extra spear. And that is really what's making the difference here. The boss is dying so fast. And they are running Night Elves, so they can use the Shadow Melt. There we go, the Rogue used Shadow Melt to get rid of that Exile cast, and whenever the boss is recasting it, they can use Shadow Melt again, unless it goes to the same person a couple of times in a row. So that is really nice to see them using different racials just to skip some Exile casts.
And if ZyBB has Zoomer reactions, and he's very youthful with it, he can actually grip that Dark Exile as well, and that can save your team a substantial amount of time. And now look at this, Aster.y is burning the rest of their melds. Ooh, and did they get the grip? It looks like they got the grip on Xingqian. ZyBB, very youthful grip, and now Xingqian blocks off that Dark Exile debuff, and he will not die.
Perfect. Okay, that is so nice. Now they are going to have all of their damage dealers up, and this is really what's making the difference for them here. Look at the time as well. 13 minutes into the dungeon, and they're about to finish up the boss. They only have the Fleshcrafter left to cleave down as well, and they might even be getting the best time in this Necrotic Wake that we have seen in this dungeon. Complexity has a 13 minutes 42 clear. That is the best one we've had so far, and Aster.y is beating that time pretty cleanly as well. 13 minutes 22. Actually, the Flashcrafter is still alive. 13 minutes 27. Wow, insane clear by Aster.y.
Aster.y just lighting up the series to start us off in Necrotic Wake. Very impressive performance here, and now they've had that opportunity to kind of just relax themselves and better prepare for this after they had that early loss today to Echo, and man, they are ready for a rematch by the looks of it. Very big first win of the series by Aster.y, Dratnos.
That it is indeed a new best overall tournament time in Necrotic Wake, even as you mentioned, surpassing that complexity time, which I already had thought was going to be pretty insurmountable, but there it is. Wow, what a blazing fast run through this dungeon, and the level of cleanliness as well. I mean, it wasn't fully perfect, but anytime you're getting out of Necrotic Wake fast with 0 deaths, those are usually you only get to pick one of those things.
That's right. And you see a number of times where, runs can just get absolutely sunk by just having some deaths and having some mistakes being made. And we saw that side of it on the side of Ambition here, Naguro, where they just were not able to survive a number of these pulls. And once one thing goes wrong, the entire run just gets thrown off track.
Yeah, especially in a dungeon like Necrotic Wake, where all of the pulls that you're doing are just so insane. You have 50 mobs plus a boss plus a tormentor, and one thing goes wrong and it just falls apart so quickly, especially when the tank dies, right? When Nerf went down there, it's so hard to recover from there. And whenever you play against a team like Aster.y that makes 0 mistakes, then there's just no coming back from that.
Yep, Dranos, let's start going over as well that death on the side of Nerf.
Yeah, so I mean, there were a couple different things that ended up going really wrong for Ambition in this one. One of the first is the death here in this section. There's so much pressure on the group. The bursting sacks on everybody and the kiting ends up being onesie going down here, and that cost them a little bit of time, not too much, but they were neck and neck after the first boss, the two teams. Also, you can see the shield on the Skeletal Marauder not being broken through a couple times there, leading to even more time needing to be spent there. Look at the way as well that Aster are able to manage this pull, keeping everything in that tight AoE in a pack that is actually pretty tough to do that in. The Necrotic Breath going on the opposite side of the boss there, really fortunate for them, although I'm sure they had a plan to react if it targeted where the rest of the group was instead. And Ambition also making this pull work fairly well. You can see there, this is one of the differences here between the Fire and the Frost as well, was the Fire burst at the start of this, really phenomenal, whereas the Frost was just kind of high sustained over the entire duration of the pull. But in particular, for helping kill off the first couple sets of enemies, Fire actually looking very strong. This Necropolis pull, though, from Aster.y, the difficulty of this pull is just so intense. Look at the way that they're trying to group everything up. They have the spear that they want to deploy here, and look at that, grouping everything up and then landing all of their damage to make sure it's hitting every single enemy. The Sigil Chains has everything now in such a tight group, and even still, even with that going on, look at how much pressure they're under as these mechanics start going off, as they start running out of crowd control, as they get into bursting. Look at these health bars. Everybody dropping so low. Qingshin going into that pod. They have a Mass Dispel that lands here to help with some of the worst of the bursting, but still so precarious and so impressive they're able to make that pull all work out. Meanwhile, on the side of Ambition, you can see the exact same spot in the pull where that bursting starts happening, where these mechanics start going off, while the soldiers start jumping on everybody. Everybody is under so much pressure. Nerf runs out of his meta, no spikes, no fiery brand, no last resort, ends up leading to a dead demon hunter there, and as a result, that was the last wipe that really threw it so far behind for Ambition. And there you can see beautiful lining up of that Flesh Crafter onto the Surgeon, even though their hook didn't quite land the way they were hoping to. Well adapted, getting onto that last boss. And Naguro was talking about the Shadow Melds on this last boss. Shadow Meld is really good. It'll stop the Dark Exile, and the boss has some casts that it will then have higher priority than Dark Exile. So sometimes you can get yourself 10 seconds before the next one. It will still cast pretty soon thereafter, though, but you can keep doing that until it targets somebody like your mage, and then you can life grip your mage, and they can shadow or ice block, and that removes the debuff that means they're going to die in 30 seconds, and it makes it entirely free if you can make it work out. So you can see right after this Comet Storm, we're going to start seeing the first Dark Exile cast come out, and watch how they manage these casts, right? There's one going out, and actually right before it finishes, you can see the Shadow Meld there from the Rogue. And then later on, just a couple of seconds later, that same Dark Exile that's queued up starts going out here. Shadow Meld on ZyBB. Now it's going to target over on Qingshin. Qingshin actually melds, then it retargets him, but he gets ZyBB lands the grip on Qingshin. Qingshin then fires off the ice block, and beautifully managed ability. The boss actually spending so much time casting Dark Exile instead of stuff like Comet Storm as well is a huge DPS increase too, so let's not forget about that.
Yeah, with that victory, Aster.y is up 1 in the series, and we start setting our sights here on the other side, which one of the longer dungeons that we've had experienced throughout this tournament weekend and everything like that, and it's going up to almost as long as Spires. About 18 minutes has been the best time that we've had, and who's got the best time on this one, Tettles? Of course, it's Aster.y, so they're sitting in a really strong position as we look at this series.
Wait, Ambition has the best time on this dungeon.
It does? What's
3
Ambition?
seconds only. 3 seconds.
17. They're at 17:49.
1749, wow, for
Say-
Ambition. 1753 for Aster.y.
It
So we
was.
are going to be in such a tight game between these two. That is going to be incredibly close.
Yeah, and I think it's just like, so yes, Ambition does have the best time in here by 4 seconds or whatever, but at the end of the day, that is just like one mistake that separates these two teams. It's like if anything can go wrong, it's proven as a proof of concept between these two teams that they are going to be in a deadlock, and if anything happens one way or the other, it can swing so fast. Just one death can make or break this run for both of these teams.
I wouldn't even say a mistake, right? 4 seconds. That's literally just like,
That's
like
very
one less
anything.
ability
That's a
or
crit.
something.
Yeah.
That really could be anything. We'll see if Ambition's going to be able to tie up this series and force it into a game 3. Let's get into the other side.
Ooh, and
There we go. We're back in the other side, and Ambition now switched to those Night Elves, interestingly enough. So Aster playing the Night Elves in Necrotic Wake, now Ambition is playing the Night Elves here in the other side. And the teams did both go to the right. No, actually, is Ambition on the left?
both of the teams did go to the right. Yes, you are correct.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, I think the biggest difference between these two teams is IBV ended up popping his Jotungeir almost insta and then swapped it off. And so that allows him to stay in that angel form for a little bit longer. It's not going to be any difference between the two teams. Both of these Windwalker monks from both sides end up doing this technique where they swap that two-handed polearm from the 9 on and off fairly regularly. It allows you to get a lot more main stat and allows your burst windows to be optimized a little bit more. And Ambition gets like a half second ahead on that first pull. And I think that one of the biggest time saves or losses for these teams is going to be how they stack up this trash pack near this urn. And we've seen across the whole entire weekend, a lot of the teams have had varied amounts of success for how close and how tight-knit this pack can get stacked up.
Yeah, this is a very crucial pack. And one more thing I wanted to note about that first pack, even though Ambition did kill it 1 second earlier, they committed Shadow Blades while Aster.y saved it.
Ooh.
So that only making up 1 second is not too great for Ambition, actually. And now we're seeing both of them commit the Ashen Hollow for this huge trash pull. It looks like Ambition is slightly cleaner, but I'm not even sure at this point, as some of the mobs are dying off, but there's some heals getting interrupted last second, all of these ghosts spawning as well. And yeah, it looks like Ambition a little bit quicker on this one, as they're now moving on to Hakar.
But like you said, Aster.y still has that Shadow Blades, which Subtlety Rogue in general for the MDI is one of the specializations that they are one of the best like single target damage specs. It's why you bring them. You're bringing them for their AoE to single target damage conversion, and you're bringing them to be able to carry on single target. And having that Shadow Blades for that priority damage on the boss here is something that is super valuable. Aster.y immediately fires off their Bloodlust, where Ambition is saving theirs for a little bit. And so the difference here is going to be how many of these little minions of Hakar, Sons of Hakar, you're going to get, right, Nagura?
Yeah, Ambition actually going ahead in damage now whenever they are popping their Bloodlust, even though they don't have the Shadow Blades available on that Rogue. But yeah, it's incredibly close between those two teams, and the Suns, you want to keep them on a minimum because you don't want to deal with that AoE aura ticking the whole time, and you also don't want to deal with those puddles, especially since you're running basically 4 melee players, so you constantly have that blood pool spawning from the Suns. If Hakar is standing in there whenever he channels his blood barrier, then that is going to be a problem for them. You can see Ambition now just standing in the puddles, just DPSing through, just yelling at Alismir, just heal me please.
Yo.
And Aster.y actually being ahead now as the finish of the boss a couple of seconds earlier.
How long was Hakar sitting at full mana? Hakar was like capped on its energy for such a long time, and they just barely beat that last shield cast. I think that they saved a decent amount of time just by being able to either delay that last shield, or they were able to get 1 shield less as a whole over how many Ambition ended up getting. And hey, that's how you save a lot of time in MDI, is just these small optimizations that for, if you're doing a key on live, you're like, okay, that's only going to cost us a little bit of time. But for Aster.y, that 5 seconds means everything.
Yeah, it definitely does. And now both of them are moving to the right side to get to the Mechagon wing, basically. They do... oh no! They're not actually falling in! That is so unfortunate. That is going to be a pretty big time loss for them because he's going to have to release and go all the way back. While Ambition, they are already moving on. This is actually a big time loss. Ambition, though, they have Ellesmere. Okay, that was on purpose. So Nerf is pulling those warlords to the side. Ellesmere is aggroing those raptors and the soldiers to move them into the next pool. And now Aster.y doing the same thing, just a little bit later because of the death on that monk.
That was so unfortunate. That I think we've all been there. If you're trying to jump around that enraged spirit patrol, and it just happens sometimes where you're like on top of the wall, and then your momentum will carry you into the opposite side. Now Aster.y pulling the dental drill into the corner, trying to let it cast its first haywire cast, where Ambition on your right side of your screen has already got the ARF engaged, have all these headless clients engaged. They're trying to beat the second dental drill haywire cast. That's the most important thing. So you see JPC Prio Champ just focusing that mob down, and right before that haywire goes off, they do end up getting that mob killed off. Now their attention is on the ARF. It is very dangerous whenever it is enraged, so they're going to use the Rogue Soothe to be able to dispel that enrage off of that mob.
Yeah, and again, a little bit of a difference in cooldowns committed here, as JPC is using his Shadow Blades and Aster.y's Rogue is holding on to it for a later pull. Ambition now already moving on as they're using their Shroud to get past these lubricators, also using the engineering button to get rid of those slimes. Now we'll see what they do with these sentient oils. That's usually something that the teams just CC and then they snap them to the next boss, which is a strategy that actually was first used by Aster.y.
Yeah, Aster taught the world this strategy about how you end up dropping your Sigil of Misery on this pack, leave the mob CC'd for a little bit, eventually. So your Demon Hunter tank has to generate threat on them first, and then eventually they will snap to you in the Mechagon Wing, but not before trying to grip your tank to them, so he has to cancel that grip with Glide. That is a very important point to this, and that's why you see Nerf and Inuo tanking the boss where they're tanking it, because they're trying to make sure that they snap in a consistent location.
Yeah, and one thing that I've seen Aster.y do in this dungeon previously, and not sure if it was intended, but one of the sentient oils actually snapped to them like way later, and I was wondering if they maybe did that on purpose, using one longer CC on one of the sentient oils so it breaks out later, just to get some more cleave for longer of the fight. Not sure, but right now they only have one of the sentient oils. Ambition already has all of them on their side, so they're just AoE cleaving them down.
Yeah, and another thing to point out too is both of these teams are running that Signet of Bolstering power that you do get off of Incinerator Arcalet. That's one of the reasons that the teams elect to go right at the beginning, is because you do get the kill on that Incinerator mini-boss, and with that Bolstering power, you're able to get about 15% increased bonus damage whenever you have things such as like explosives dying or the sentient oils being killed off, and so that's actually a massive damage gain for these teams. Ambition, unfortunately, you saw Ellesmere having to run off and click that bomb, and it looks like Aster.y is starting to catch up a little bit, even though they had that mistake with ZyBB dying.
Yeah, definitely catching up, and they are taking a lot of damage though from all of these oils just casting through, and also getting the stun on everybody. But there we go, Ambition now getting the boss lower and lower, and some of the if you look at the cooldowns, JPC just holding on to that Shadow Blades now, and Aster.y's Rogue as well. So they're gonna be using that on the next pull, I would assume. Interesting though to see that they're just holding on to it when it could be so good on a boss like this.
Yeah, and right as you say that,
JPC actually did use it, yeah.
Fires off the Shadow Blades as Millhouse Manastorm disappears, and that's an unfortunate use of his CDs. However, this is going to be incredibly close for both of these teams. And Aster.y is starting to claw back a little bit of damage, even without using the Shadow Blades, just being able to save just a little bit of time due to damage optimization. And we were talking about it before. We know that both of these teams are within a few seconds of one another in this dungeon, and now Aster.y has completely caught up Nagura, even with that 5-second penalty.
Yeah, that's crazy to see. So even though they reached the boss later, they somehow killed it earlier. You can look at the boss split, 8 seconds difference in favor of Ambition for the second boss split, but 5 seconds in favor for Aster.y in the first boss split. So they're just really equal here, as Nerf is now pulling that Enraged Spirit to the side, using the Shadow Melt to de-aggro, while everyone else just walking past. Actually, Nerf did manage to de-aggro, and he needs to fall into his death. So
The
that
ma- the
means
Masters
that the
again?
nerf...
Oh, he released.
Yes, and they can't get the Masters off either because of those masks spawning. So now the death penalties are going to be equal. And Aster.y pretty sure is going to be in the lead at this point, because it looks like Ambition were just a little bit slower in the rest of the dungeon, and therefore the time that Aster.y lost is less crucial compared to the time that Ambition lost.
So those enraged spirits are actually on different patrols depending on when the key is started and depending on when the teams actually zone into the dungeon. And so you have to be prepared for every single patrol that you can get. It was very unfortunate that Nerf burned his Shadow Meld and was too close to that enraged spirit and re-aggroed combat with it. And now this is a less bad mistake than what happened to Aster.y earlier. Yeah, ZyBB had to jump off and they lost some time to that. But now they are firmly in the lead as both of these teams run down this hallway.
Yeah, and I mean the death penalties are equal. I would say it's like, I don't know, it's like 5 to 10 seconds in favor of Aster.y now. Aster now going ahead, pulling that Tormentor with a bunch of trash in that Ardent Wield area. This Ardent Wield area can really make or break it as well on how efficient you are with these pulls. Because there's just going to be back-to-back insanely huge pulls. And then there's also going to be a pull on top of Dealer Zaxa, where lots of things can go wrong. And we have seen Aster.y actually played incredibly risky by keeping the trash alive for as long as they can to get efficient funneling damage onto the boss. So we'll see what happens, but first they have to finish off Varuth.
Alright, and so Varuth is actually very dangerous, and you do see Anuo ends up getting feared, kind of slow on the dispel there from Aster.y, and this is going to be fine. He does end up eventually getting that dispel, and that is a very dangerous position that they were in. They were really slow on dealing with this pack, and I think that this is a point where if Ambition is able to keep their trash grouped up just a little bit longer, this is where they can gain some more time.
Yeah, and now with those extra powers picked up as well, they have both of those offensive anima powers. And look at Aster. Oh no! Their rogue actually goes down here, and they do have a battle rest available, but they only have an engineer rest they can use, and they're having a hard time using it. As you can see, yes, there's a pot, and there was an disorienting cast going off on the Holy Paladin. This is the cast that you never want to see go off. This only happens when there's two players in combat only, and this is probably what happened because the rogue was dead. And now they have to use another battle rest on their Holy Paladin, and the Urn stun did go out, and he immediately dies again as soon as he accepted the rest. This is going to be a full team wipe. And they had used the Urn already. This is a disaster for Aster.y because they cannot replicate the pull again without that Urn. So they're going to have to go slower now.
JPC sends his regards, Wicked, as now Ambition dealing with their Urn pull, not having the same mistakes as Aster.y, and we were talking about just how close these two teams were going to be in the DOS to the point where any one mistake can tilt the tide, and now Ambition is so far ahead of Aster.y. That full wipe was massive.
Yeah, definitely. And there is a 2 to 5 minute delay on the broadcast, but then they will be able to see that the Aster.y wiped, and that's going to be a huge relief for them, because that means that if they don't have any more wipes and they do the same pulls as they previously have done with their route, then they should be the ones winning. But of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that nothing is going to happen. So all eyes on Ambition, as they're going to be attempting that Dealer Zaxa pull that I've been talking about earlier, where you just pull a bunch of trash, basically everything that is left in this dungeon, on top of the next boss.
All right, and so now Ambition here taking a detour, immediately hodging this hatchling. So this hatchling will cast a cry, and if you let the cry go off, then we'll pull the matriarch. Matriarchs are banned. Even for MDI teams, matriarchs are banned. And so you do see Ambition here making a detour, killing that hatchling off, and now they are pulling all of this trash into Dealer Zaxa. They have all of their CDs available except for Shadowblades. But they have most of their cooldowns available here. They are going to probably elect a Bloodlust once this trash gets in. They're going to drop their Ashen Hollow as well, as you see it come out, pairing that up with the wings. And now, basically all of this trash, it looks like for most like live key teams, you would think, oh yeah, you just focus down this trash, this is not that big of a deal. You really need to make sure that the trash gets killed off. But for these MDI teams, it is 100% the boss HP that is going to be the limiting factor for them. You see Nerf, he's in meta, he's just kiting around. He's allowing these Blight Beaks and these Elder Horns and stuff like that to hit him as minimally as possible because he wants to keep the trash alive. for that Rogue to be able to funnel off of all of this trash and do insane amounts of boss damage.
And look what a great job they're doing as well. They are dropping really low though. Ellesmere does have that debuff from the boss on him, and he's dropping lower and lower and lower. They have to be a bit careful because all of this trash is just doing so much damage to Nerf, while the boss is doing so much damage to Group. Ellesmere just trying to recover as he's using Blessing of Sacrifice to make sure that Nerf stays alive, but Ellesmere needs to make sure that he stays alive himself. There we go, they did recover now. They should be able to finish off this boss with all of the trash being dead at this point. And then the last trash they have to do is that 8% that they're going to be doing while fighting the last boss after that intermission is over. So only the boss left for them plus that trash at the very end.
All right, and now looking on the left side of your screen, Aster.y with that major setback, they are about to be able to engage dealer Xyxa, but it feels like it's almost too little too late for them. Ambition, even if they weren't able to get all of their totems clicked here, even if they mess up and have a death on this fight and have to do 2 phases, they would still be firmly in the lead. For Aster.y fans, if you want them to win, Ambition has to have probably 2 mistakes even, like 2 massive errors would be an acceptable amount for them to be able to come back. For Ambition here, they just need to make sure that they continue to play clean. They don't have any mistakes, and they're able to just pull off what they've practiced so heavily. And looking at this, look at this Enraged Spirit. It's in a pretty bad patrol. They're going to jump around it, then they're going to stack in the melee and make sure that they also do not pull Aura's Cold Heart here. This is actually very scary. Ooh, but Ambition.
They're killing it.
Ooh, this is interesting that they are killing it. They're going to drop the urn on this. I think in previous runs they were electing to skip this Enraged Spirit. Maybe they only have to kill one of the Enraged Spirits, and it just kind of depends on the patrol. This may be an audible play, though, because they also know that they're pretty far ahead.
Yeah, I don't think they plan on killing this at all. They're just doing it because it's right in front of the boss, and they just, I guess they're thinking, instead of killing the 2 mobs at the very, very start, because there's 2 packs basically, right? There's 1 pack at the platform that they're landing after the intermission, and then there's 2 mobs at the very start. And Aster.y actually having a wipe on their side as their Holy Paladin went down earlier in this fight. They didn't have a battle rest available. They tried to finish off the boss with without their healer alive, but now 2 more damage dealers died. Their tank follows, and this is just a full wipe for them. It was a valiant effort to try and finish this off without their healer, but unfortunately it was just not enough. And that's just going to be sealing the deal here for Ambition. All they have to do is finish up this boss, and they could even have a they could even go with 2 intermission phases here to play safe if they wanted to, right? They could just send 2 damage dealers to 1 totem and everyone else to the other, and then do another run if they feel like that is better. But they do have to play the trash after the intermission, so I guess it is safer to go with more haste buffs to have that extra damage for the trash.
All right, and so now Moizala here is being going into that phase, and you see that Aura's Cold Heart is kind of nearby where they need to enter that left totem. So you would have JPC pull that off to the side, and you see that his Vanish is on CD, so he has to pull Aura's Cold Heart and then vanish it off as he's hitting that portal to be able to get into his spot. And so now all eyes are on these Visages. Are the teams going to be able to kill these off? It's a 20 fortified, and we've seen some issues with these ads on different weeks with different compositions. However, with it being a 24, it should be fine. JPC, looking at that Enraged Spirit that's walking awfully close to him. He does not have Vanish, but he's able to get his ad killed off and just in time. He was tapped out there, it looked like, and almost pulled the Enraged Spirit there.
Yeah, he is trying his best. That's why the Rogue is being sent to that platform, because there is that Enraged Spirit that is patrolling around. And Rogues are usually very good at using Cloak if they have to in case it aggroes, and then they have Vanish plus Shadow Melt to de-aggro it in case they need it. Yeah, they have all of those images killed. You can see the 4 buffs or debuffs rather on their player frame, so that means they have all of them down. Boss is already on 12%. That Warlord is the last thing they have to finish off to get their percentage, and then that's gonna be it for Ambition. And they're gonna go in. We're gonna go into the 3rd dungeon here between Aster.y and Ambition.
Times change, man. Mortals never be as weak as you believe them
Run
to be.
throughout the other side, and once again, it's just all about the mistakes that some of these teams have been making here. You can really feel the pressure starting to build as well for both of these groups as Ambition takes the victory, Ratnos.
Yeah, a run that was substantially slower than both their own best run and Aster.y's best run. So they got to feel like they're getting away with something here, making it to a Game 3 after a complete catastrophe of a run for Aster.y.
Yep, with that, I mean, they have to start setting their sights on a dungeon, which is not going to get any easier either, because we've seen, mistakes abound in the first 2 dungeons, and they can be common and everything here and there, but Sanguine Depths has also just been a brutal dungeon as well, Nagura, so it's not like any team here is getting a breather.
Oh, yes, definitely. And we've only seen Sanguine Depths twice so far. Neither Aster.y or Incarnation or Ambition have played this dungeon before, and that might mean, because it is such a difficult dungeon as well, maybe they hoped that they're not going to be playing it. I'm not sure, because it's also the 3rd game in this series, That's always something that you want to look out for. And yeah, we've seen Incarnation have the best time of the tournament, 14 minutes 50 clear. That was incredibly quick. They also were playing that Ventir Moonkin as well in that dungeon. Not sure if either of those teams can replicate that really quick Incarnation clear.
Yeah, we'll have to see. It's going to be a tall task. But first, let's talk about the other side, Dratnos. Aster.y, of course, having a disastrous run, but Ambition not even meeting their previous best.
Yeah, so let's talk about the start of the dungeon, where we thought this was going to be 4 seconds separating these 2 teams' best times, and we were thinking, wow, look at this little bit of extra damage that Aster can get on Hakar, right? And they're able to kill this boss. Even though they pulled it later, they actually end up killing it a little bit ahead of where Ambition were at, but then disaster struck here in the first bad omen of many things here. Watch IBB just bop, runs into the totem and falls off to the side there. Really, really costly and unfortunate way to have things start. Then on the side of Ambition, similar problems there, where the Shadow Meld actually isn't far enough away. The combat isn't dropped by Nerf. Nerf having to jump off ends up getting rezzed, but unfortunately the masks have now started casting, which made even further problems. But those were some 15, 30-second losses for both teams up till that point. Here we get to where it was really the breaker for Aster. This is a huge pull that they do in Ardenweld. They've got Bop on Anuo so that he can group all of these things up. Meanwhile, on the other side, they're grabbing almost as much as they can with the Rogue, but unfortunately, the Rogue dying before getting anything in combat with the rest of the group, ends up dying right at the start there. Now they're trying to group everything up, and they end up having everybody already starting to drop really low. You can see some miscommunication about what the plan is going to be. Some players running away, others still trying to make the pull work. Anuo getting in there, and now ZyBB, after originally trying to stay out of combat, comes back in, tries to get involved in this pull, and they're going to use Sweep and everything, but look at all those explosives that are now coming out. Sweep into Sigil of Misery, and with 4 players alive now, just their healer is down. They think they can still do this, so you can see Qingshin actually using the Urn here, and that's going to be something that will hopefully let them do some AoE damage, but unfortunately the Sigil of Misery breaks on some mobs, so now not everything is actually grouped up, so they can't even effectively AoE all these targets. Explosives, so many of them spawning. ZyBB rolls out, casts the battle res on the healer, rolls back in, and explosive goes off and ends ZyBB there. Qingshin down as well, and the rest of the group dies soon after. This is a really costly wipe that was made more costly by continuing to try and make it work, and by activating the Urn, using battle reses but not instantly accepting it. Some people running away and trying to stay out of combat, others still trying to make the pull work. If everybody had been on the same page there, it would have been less costly. Wouldn't have mattered though. Nothing would have helped once that turned into a wipe. Beat the incredible run that then Ambition were able to keep going. With Nerf's death there costing them maybe 20 seconds. Actually pulling this Enraged Spirit as well, based on where it was on the patrol, maybe also based on how badly they knew the run was going for Aster. They knew that they had the time to not have to do anything fancy and try and skip this thing, because if it's at that point in the patrol, you can wait for the patrol and it's still a little bit of a time save, but then you're talking about only saving like 5 seconds in exchange for a huge increase in danger on the last boss fight. So really good decision. Just kill that Enraged Spirit instead. Finish off the boss fight, lowest risk of wiping that they possibly could have, and ending up finishing that. Not their fastest run, a little bit less than a minute slower than their fastest run, but still way faster than the multiple wipes that ended up happening for Aster.
Yeah, Aster just could not catch a break throughout that game, and Sanguine Depths going to be where we're moving on to decide who moves on to face off against Echo, and I'm extremely excited for this, not only because it can be such a brutal dungeon, but we just haven't really seen it that much this weekend. There's no map bans or anything, except for our grand finals, of course. So a lot of teams either are just 2-0ing and not getting to this dungeon to begin with, and the ones that have gotten to this point, though, Nagura, have been brutalized by this dungeon.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically a perfect dungeon to finish up the series here between Aster.y and Ambition, because it really will show which team is deserving to get into that final against Echo, right? Because this team is such a difficult dungeon all around. It's so crucial to not have any sort of mistakes, because one mistake means you lose the Lantern buff. It just has a huge domino effect, and you just end up losing more and more time. So recovering anything in this dungeon is really, really difficult. And I think it really will go to show whichever of those teams is going to be more consistent.
What were you going to say, Titles?
I would feel very scared. If I was Aster.y, I would feel very scared to be going Sanguine Depths, because like it can go so bad so fast, and it doesn't matter which team you are. It doesn't matter if you're the best team. It doesn't matter if you're the first seed. It doesn't matter if you're the 8th seed. If you have one death in Sanguine Depths, you can actually just completely lose your run in that Tarvald wing, and it's just like, a lot of the times it's just like a super unfortunate issue where it's like kind of, I don't want to say it's completely out of your control. You can absolutely outplay everything that happens in here, but man, it does feel bad if you're like, oh, accidentally got chain hit by the scribe three or four times, and then and then it's just like you end up dying, and it's just, if I was Aster.y, I would be incredibly scared for the Sanguine.
I think both teams have plenty of reason to be scared on this one. Once again, this is going to be the decider to determine whether Aster.y or Ambition moves on to our grand finals. Lots on the line for both of these teams as Sanguine Depths gets going.
Oh, wow, there it is.
Ooh.
The Moonkins coming out. Venthyr Moonkin for Ambition. And it might be a Kyrian Moonkin for Aster.y, actually. It's a little bit of a difference here in the Covenants, as both of them are gearing up to do that first pull, pulling everything on top of that first Lantern, of course. And yes, Aster.y's Moonkin is playing Kyrian. You can see it show up in the damage meters now.
All right, so now you see Xing Shen. He is the main character for Aster.y. He is going to be providing most of their damage, whereas Ambition, they're going to be playing like this slingshot where whenever they use their Moonkin CDs with 1C Vamp with that Ravenous Frenzy, they're going to kind of take the lead. But then in the meantime, they're going to slow down really heavily just by the fact that Venthyr Moonkin is a bystander typically whenever it doesn't have cooldowns.
Yeah, definitely not going to be great whenever those cooldowns are down. You also see Onesie playing with that Heart of the Wild, while the Moonkin for Aster.y is playing Massroot. It's a little bit of a difference in CC as well and in utility. And now we do see Aster.y using a Trout and that skip to get past most of his trash, pulling Arcoleth on top of the boss as well. Ambition taking it a bit slow as they're trying to gather up all of this trash here before they pull the boss.
So this is one of the reasons that you actually end up running the Moonkin in this dungeon. So whenever you're pulling Arcoleth with all of these ticks, you really want that Solar Beam to be able to keep all of these ticks interrupted while you need to continue to rotate kicks on the Arcoleth. And so while Sigil of Silence is great for the ticks, chaining both of those things, chaining the Sigil of Silence into that Solar Beam really allows you to enable this pull in a different way. Because if you look at the side of Ambition, those Engorge casts are starting to go off for those ticks, and Onesie ends up going down at the end of his ramp for Ambition, and the trash is still alive. This could actually be a full wipe if Ambition isn't able to recover and get this trash killed off.
This is actually such a disaster for them because they are playing that Venthyr, and he was just 10 seconds into his cooldowns when he died. So he lost all of his damage here, all of his burst, and he's also losing the Lantern buff as well. That's actually such a horrible death for Ambition. If anyone else would have died, it would have not been that much of a problem. But losing the Venthyr Moonkin there is just a disaster. Look at the difference in HP now between the bosses for Aster.y and Ambition. Aster.y playing so much cleaner in this pull.
Look at the difference in the Moonkin's damage in between this pull. Onesie is below nerf because he lost his 3-minute CD on that pack, where Aster.y's Moonkin, sure, he's playing a worse Covenant, and his individual stats are going to be a lot worse, but it's just the polarizing nature of that Ravenous Frenzy, and he lost 3 minutes worth of damage with one just problem. And it's like we were talking about going into this, how I was talking about Aster.y should be afraid to be playing Sanguine Depths because just one mistake can cost you an insane amount of time. It happened to Ambition. They lost that one, they have that one mistake, and now it's costing them somewhere in the range of probably 45 seconds.
Yeah, and that's the thing, again, right? We keep talking about this, but it's just true. When you're playing that Venthyr Moonkin, it's a pretty high risk, high reward kind of strategy, because whenever your cooldowns are down, your damage is going to be still low. And if your Moonkin dies during those cooldowns, or you have some other reason you can't use them, then it's just going to be such a huge loss. Aster.y though, they did use that Shroud to get past some of the trash here, and now they're killing off that Overseer pack with the Sentinel as well on top of this Lantern. You can see they're ramping up those Lantern stacks. They want to get up to 10, and then depending on which strategy they're running, they might be trying to refresh that Lantern stack in the Torvald area, but they have to go past Baruth and the mini-boss first.
Yeah, and so now they're just going to sit here DPSing down the Spiteful Shade. They're going to drop combat, and like you said, it's going to be interesting to see what they do here. So they're stealthing up. Okay, so they're just burning invisibility potions here. They don't even maybe their Shroud isn't available yet. It's kind of hard to tell. And so now they are pulling this Overseer pack with the Oppressors into Executioner Baruth. And with the 10 stack, this pack should be pretty easily doable. We've seen different strategies for this dungeon, but typically these MDI teams really like to avoid pulling those Overseers because those Overseers make you do reduced damage. And honestly, it costs you more time than it typically ends up saving you as a whole, but you have to do some not great packs whenever you're running this dungeon. And so you have to just decide, oh, what are the packs that are less efficient that we are going to be looking to do here? And so now Aster.y ends up getting that Overseer killed off. They just have this Javeliner, and they need to be, and if you're looking on the right side of their unit frames, they need to be refreshing that 10 stack of that Sinful Boon buff.
Yeah, they have to go quick if they want to refresh that. Aster now moving to that right side. You can see it already opening that Lantern on their Rogue there. They do have two Venthyrs, Rogue and Paladin, to be able to open those Lanterns. And now they're trying to kill something up. They got it.
Nice.
There we go. They immediately killed off one of the mobs. Now they're up to 10 stacks. One of the casts actually going through on their Moonkin here. One of the Root did manage to get rid of that though. And the cooldown's also being popped for their Moonkin. So they're trying to get all of that killed, and they're constantly refreshing their Lantern buff too, of course.
Yeah, and ZyPB really doing a lot of utility work on this kind of dungeon. And so he's able to get Anuo as many resets as he reasonably can with the trees. In addition to that, he's able to keep all the mobs grouped up on top of those lanterns. And look at that, they're just leaving those Spiteful Shades mass rooted on top of that lantern to give them the latest possible refresh on their stacks. And now they are progressing through the dungeon. And this is great for their position. Executor Tarvald is engaged, and so we saw this from Incarnation whenever they were running Sanguine Depths earlier, how they were just utilizing this ring. Aster.y still has one Lantern that they have yet to engage, and so they're going to burn Executor Tarvald before their 10 stack drops. Then they're going to refresh this 10 stack of the Sinful Boon Lantern in just a little bit, and then take it into the third boss room, and it allows for the absolute maximum amount of optimization on this pack.
Oh no, Nerf is going down for Ambition. Nerf tried so hard to refresh his necrotic stacks. He was running away trying to drop the stacks. And then on the last millisecond, he refreshed the necrotic from like 36 to 37. And there's just no way he was going to survive that. That's a full team wipe for Ambition in the worst possible moment because they had those Lantern stacks and now they lost everything just because of a millisecond difference there between Nerf getting rid of that necrotic stack or refreshing it. That's heartbreaking for Ambition.
That's probably going to be the end of it for them. They are losing so much time. We talked about how much time you can end up losing in Sanguine Depths if one mistake occurs, and that is a mistake that's going to cost them somewhere in the range of like maybe like 3 or 4 minutes, maybe even more. Aster.y on the left side, they unfortunately aren't able to get Tarvald killed off quick enough, so they're not going to get a 10 stack refresh on their Lantern. However, they do still have that one Lantern left to engage. They do have Spiteful, so they will be able to get a 10 stack. It's just not going to be a refresh and an extension like we've seen from some of the other teams with the fastest runs in here.
Yeah, this is definitely very unfortunate for them. Aster.y though, they are on their way to get that last lantern activated to be able to use those stacks for the next boss. You can see they got that warden, they got all of those scribes and some ghouls as well in there to be able to get the extra stacks. A lot of the cooldowns are actually down at this point, so the next boss pull can be dangerous with all of that trash there. But yeah, they're definitely through the most dangerous part. The most dangerous part that will cost you the most time if you make mistakes is that ring area. We see that she death proc here too on her rogue. Did manage to survive though, thankfully. And now they're just trying to kite out those shades, refreshing the buff one more time, and then they're moving on. And yeah, this really was like I would say like one of the scariest parts of this dungeon now done for Aster.y. Of course, there's still really dangerous parts left in the dungeon, but I would say that if you make a mistake there, it's going to cost you less of a time loss than if you die in that ring area.
Yeah, and so now they're taking this 10 stack of the buff into Beryllia, and this is going to allow you to be able to just absolutely nuke this boss. Whenever you're running this Subtlety Rogue plus this Frost Mage, and you have this 50% damage gain on top of it, this boss's HP is just going to melt. And so while there are these oppressors casting Rack Soul on everything, you have things such as like the Sigil of Silence and that Solar Beam that's going to allow you to be able to mitigate a lot of the group-wide damage. So now, all your melee have to do is watch out for these Spiteful Shades, and if they get meleeed by them, that would be pretty bad and you'd probably die, but it's just something that these top caliber MDI teams are trying to mitigate as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And you can see the buff is still running for Aster.y. They have a couple of seconds left here. On that lantern buff, you can see one of the oppressors still alive. They're just trying to kite it out. The Ashen is still in cooldown for the Holy Paladin. I would also assume that they're not committing it anymore at this point. And I mean, they have so much damage on this boss too. Their Frost Mage just blasting this pull. Of course, a lot of it is AoE as well on that trash pack that they pulled before. And then after this, they're going to be moving on to that last gauntlet area, which, to be honest, that's still a pretty significant thing for them to do correctly because of that lantern buff that is there too. And because they also have that Sogodon, that physical damage increase on the last boss. So if they mismanage their cooldown, if they mismanage the lantern buff, it could cause a wipe on the last boss, because the longer that fight lasts, the more dangerous it becomes with those Tormentor debuffs.
Oh man, look at Ambition. They're having to do this boss now without any lantern buff at all. This is, and there are 2 full bosses behind where Aster.y is. This is just a position where Aster.y would have to have multiple monumental mistakes, and it's just like Sanguine Depths can be a dungeon that turns from like, all right, everything is going okay, to, oh no, we full wiped and have lost multiple minutes in just a split second. And it's off the back of those lanterns, like we were talking about earlier. And so now Aster.y here, basically the only thing you're looking at is Anuo's necrotic stacks on the left side of your screen. Making sure that he's able to get necrotic resets fairly reliably is the most important thing, because if he dies, then that could open up Aster.y a position to have a wipe or just massive mistakes. But assuming that Aster.y and Anuo are able to stay alive, then they definitely should be in position to be able to take this down fairly comfortably.
Yeah, and I mean, look at the time as well. 11 minutes into the dungeon, and they're already on their way to the last boss. The time to beat at the moment, the best time is 14 minutes 50 by Incarnation. To be fair, I think they even had a few mistakes there, Incarnation, so they probably could have done a little bit faster. But yeah, insane time by Aster.y here as well. And now they are on that last lantern. Looks like their Paladin did open it up just now. Hopefully they will get the refresh. That's something that we've seen Incarnation make a mistake with last time, where they just waited for too long to get the last refresh. And that's something that Aster.y has to do correctly to be able to get that buff through to the boss too.
Yeah, and Aster, you see they have that bat also. So they needed a little bit of additional count in this area. I know missed his Sigil of Flame. It's fine. He's going to have to manually pull that back now. But you see the grab that bat, and so while Anuo is grabbing General Call and the remainder of the trash back into the pack, you see Aster.y refreshing their Sinfall Boom buff, just being able to deal with some of the trash that they're keeping slowed with that Frost Mage, while their tank and their leader is grabbing the remainder of the count for them.
Yeah, they also pulled some bats from the side as well, some extra trash that they needed. We don't want to have another disaster where they're killing the last boss and then they're not at 100% trash. So keep an eye on that percentage as they're finishing off Kyle for the second to last time as they're gonna have to kill the boss again. Well, of course. As they're moving on, they did manage to refresh that buff too, if you can look at that group frame. So they're gonna have that buff, and now they're gonna be carrying that rest of the trash into the last boss in just a second. And this is the last crucial moment. They have the Bloodlust, they have the Ashen, they have all cooldowns available here. Nothing can go wrong at this point.
Yeah, absolutely nothing could possibly go wrong here. There's definitely no way that they could wipe.
Oh no.
Alright, so now General Call. They're waiting a second for it to be able to be engaged. Anuo immediately drops the shield, so if you drop it like right as the boss is engaged or right before the boss is engaged, first off, Anuo gets a reset on his Necrotic by doing that because it cleanses that debuff, and it's going to be up for the General Call ability. And so it's a really smart usage by Anuo to be able to do that. Aster.y still has 10 stacks of their Sinfall Boom buff as ZyBB Eagle goes down.
Yeah, they do have 2 battle rests available, but lost his cooldowns, right? They're not as significant as Event their Moonkin's ones, but still losing quite a lot of damage, losing the buff as well from that Lantern, even though it was about to run out anyway. So they still have 1 more battle rest in case something goes wrong, but look at the boss, still on 57%. On that 21 Tyrannical, that is still quite a lot of HP to chew through, and the Seed being popped here by their mage as well, and they should be able to get out of the pot, so it's gonna be fine. But yeah, the longer this fight lasts, the more difficult it's gonna be, because you keep getting these bleed effects and you just run out of immunities and you're slowed, so it's really hard to dodge those charges, and you have the 50% physical damage increase, so it just becomes more difficult the longer it goes. And look how slow Kyle is dropping as well, still on 54%.
Yeah, and it's like you were talking about, like once you start losing your immunes and stuff like that. So they do get a reset on their stacks by using that shield there, and so this is going to be a little bit of a reprieve. And their rogue immediately gets hit with that Wicked Gash again. He dwarfs off the bleed, which is the most dangerous part. But whenever you're playing with that Sagadon debuff, General Call is very scary. Aster.y going to be able to take that down and be able to beat Ambition 2-1.
That victory, Aster.y is going to move on to our grand finals for a rematch with Echo. And man, we've been just seeing Sanguine Depths claiming the lives of too many teams as Ambition will fall to 3rd place here, Dratnos.
Yeah, incredible run for Ambition. Getting to this point in the tournament, even getting to this tournament was a huge undertaking for them, and they've beaten so many great teams to get here, but they will fall to Aster.y from the Chinese region, who will be making it now to